There's been so many times in my life where I know there's something bigger than me moving the chess pieces. You know, some people say, you know, why'd you become a nurse? When I first got into nursing school, I was just in nursing school. I was 18 years old. I'd just gotten in. And at the time, they were doing practical application in the morning, meaning you got assigned one patient in the morning, and in the afternoon, you'd have theory. And so my dad dies very suddenly of a heart attack. He was a bigger-than-life character, the leader of our family, and it was a shock that was beyond comprehension. And you have to understand, before I went to nursing school, my dad was so excited when I finally got in that he would, when he'd be on the front lawn, watering the lawn, sitting in his lawn chair, having a smoke, his friends would come over for a beer and he'd say, Bonnie, go put the nursing cap on and come out and show the guys. You know? Yeah. I'd say, oh God, I'd be so embarrassed. And I'd put that cap on with the bobby pin and I'd be in my jeans and a sweatshirt. Hey, Dad goes, there she is, there's my nurse, you know? So it was a big deal, but secretly I wanted to be a storyteller, like in show business. But I had worked in hospitals since I was a kid. My mother had us be candy stripers and nurses' aides and nursing homes and all that stuff through high school. So my dad was like, this is the perfect fit for you, and if there's something else you want to do, you can do it. Well, I nearly get into school, and then my dad dies really suddenly. And I'm so full of anger. And I'm like, I can't go to school. And I told my mom, here's my mom in all this pain. You know, she's a young woman of 50 years old. My dad was 50. And he's gone, and there's 7 of us kids. And I said, Mom, I'm not going back to school because Dad's not going to be here to see me graduate, and it's not worth it. And even when I saw people laugh, I didn't want to see anybody laugh again. I was in the deepest, darkest despair. And my mom said, well, will you do a favor for Dad? You go 1 more week in honor of him. And if at the end of that week you want to stop, I understand. So after the funeral and everything was over, I gathered up all my courage and I said, I just got to get there Monday through Friday because Mom asked me to do it for Dad, so I'll go. But I couldn't wait till that last day. I couldn't wait to be free. I didn't want to go to school. I was so angry, and I certainly didn't want to save anybody else when we couldn't save my father when he died so fast. You know, those feelings that you have. I'm not saying that those are what I really meant, but just this, you know, shock and awe of what's happening to you at the time. So I go back to school and I get assigned 1 patient out of over 300 in the hospital, Mr. O'Brien. Mr. O'Brien has cancer throughout his body, including his eyes, so he always had a cold towel on his eyes. And I went in and I thought, I just got to get Monday through Friday, just to get to Friday. And the first day, the nursing teacher pulls me aside and she said, I know your father's passed away suddenly, but you're in a professional place here, and you don't bring your heartache to the patients. You're there to listen to them. So you have to understand that you got to buck up and be tough here, and you're back at school, and you can't put it on to your patients. So you don't talk about this here. And I said, yes, ma'am. And I walked away and I thought, oh, what an evil, you know. Why isn't she in my drama? Because, you know, I was that sad. I wanted sympathy, but she was smart. So I get Mr. O'Brien. And the first day, you know, I read that he has cancer, and I'm like overwhelmed, and I'm still, you know, choking back tears, just trying to get through the day. And Mr. O'Brien says, oh, my bride's coming today, my bride. She's 40 years we've been married, and he's calling his wife his bride. And I thought, oh, that's kind of cute, you know. And he says, you know what? What's your name? I said, Bonnie. He says, you know what, Bonnie? I feel lucky I have cancer. I said, oh, Mr. O'Brien, why would you say that? And he said, because, you know, I'm Irish. There's a lot we don't say. And he said, I've been forced to say things to my children I might not have ever said. And he said, I knew a man that I worked with, and he always said the biggest accomplishment in life was children. And he said he died very suddenly, and he never got to say goodbye. And I said, oh, and I'm thinking, oh, I just want to just burst into tears and tell Mr. O'Brien about my dad, but I didn't dare, you know. So we talk, and by the 3rd day, Mr. O'Brien and I are becoming fast friends. And a few times he mentions this man that he worked with and how much respect he had for him and how they would laugh together. And on the 3rd day, I'm thinking, I got 2 more days and I'm out of school, and how lucky I was to have Mr. O'Brien be in my life. And I open his chart and I'm looking, it says where he worked. And I said, oh, Mr. O'Brien, I know I'm not supposed to do this, but I think you might have worked with my father, because it was the same company my dad worked for. And I said, my dad was an electrician. He said, what was his name? And I said, Bob Hunt. And he says, Bob Hunt? That's the man I've been talking about. So, of course, I couldn't leave Mr. O'Brien. Right. But I didn't realize it till years later. Of course, I stayed in school because I didn't want to leave Mr. O'Brien, because at that point I felt like I was taking care of my dad. And Mr. O'Brien and I had a good cry. I remember he put his hand on my head and I leaned on the bed and we sobbed and sobbed. And I stayed in school, thank God. But then I realized when I looked back, my dad had gone to heaven, and the first thing he did was say, God, make sure she stays in school. What are we going to do? Yeah. So I always think of that time. You know, whenever I'm in doubt, or whenever I don't trust, or whenever I'm overwhelmed, I think about Mr. O'Brien, because I think, what are the odds? What are the odds? And I think my dad knew she's too fragile to go out to Hollywood and not have some substance and perspective in life inside of her heart first. And I thank God for every day I spent as a nurse. And, you know, it's still a big part of my life. I'm still very involved with the hospital. We raise money here on the show. And then I get to have moments where we have Dr. Dyer on, inspiring us and reminding us that there is something bigger than ourselves. What it is, I'm not talking about religion. Whatever your faith is, I respect it. But I do have proof in my own life that there must be something bigger moving those pieces around. And there was nothing bigger than my dad, I'll tell you that. Talk about personality. He was funny. Oh, one other line my dad said to me that I remembered, and I put it in the movie Return to Me that Dawn and I wrote with Minnie Driver when she's waiting for the heart transplant. It was, if you have a chance, we're very proud of that film, but there's a lot of my dad and mom in that movie. And it comes from a time when I was in high school and I was going through some challenging times, and I said, Dad, why me? And he looked at me and he said, you know, it's the character that's the strongest God gives the most challenges to. You have to consider this a compliment. So Carol O'Connor says that in the movie in Return to Me. And remember when we filmed that scene, it was so, you know, it meant a lot to me and to my family. And it goes on and on. You know, my dad's power. Here's a guy with a high school education, 7 kids, and he'd say, I don't know much, but I do know this. My dad said a lot of that, you know. So there's nothing like that common sense that warms your heart.